Without further ado, we're going to kick off this webinar. Today, our webinar topic is 2026 Ready for TPRM. How do you leverage scalable AI-driven risk assessments and real-time cyber risk management with professional services? I know a lot of you have this top of your mind since we're in the planning season looking at next year. How do we really leverage the resource we got allocated, and how do we max out the ROI? So it's going to be a really good session. Before I introduce our speakers that I'm super excited about today, I want to make sure that you get the most out of this webinar. First of all, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Chung Lei. I'm a Senior Product Marketing Manager from Bitsight. Really excited to see you here. You might have joined this before, so you know how to navigate through the, all the functions on the right side of your screen. But if this is your first time, welcome. There are a couple of things we'd like you to know. First of all, we got asked this a lot. This webinar is going to be recorded, and it will be shared with you. So no worries that you don't have the recording or have to take notes. It will be available on our website for on demand. You'll get it through email really easily with the links and all the good stuff. One of my favorite sections on the right side is called Docs. It's a tab in the middle between chat and Q&A. So if you click there, I think today we have 4 really good resources. That's about TPRM, it's about the services, so you can really learn more from there. Feel free to download those resources for you. They're all for free. And you're already using the chat tab, which is awesome. Don't stop there. And lastly, the last tab on your right side is Q&A. So this is where you can submit all the questions you have for the speakers today, and we'll address all your questions in the end of the webinar. And no worries if we didn't get to your questions, because we'll follow up and make sure those questions are answered. I think that's all for you to know to get the most out of the webinar. Now, really excited to introduce you the speakers today. Beginning with Henry, hopefully I got this right, Henry Mulema. Hi, Henry. You can pronounce my name however you want to, but welcome. Henry is our Senior Manager of Professional Service at Bitsight. So Henry has brought over 15 years of experience in cybersecurity and third-party risk management, with deep expertise in designing, building, and operationalizing TPRM programs for global organizations. Awesome. And beside with us, Henry leads the professional service team, which is the core topic for today. And the team has been helping customer maximize the value of the platform by having the team taking really ownership of the day-to-day TPRM activities. We're going to definitely talk more about that soon. This enables clients to free up internal resources and focus on the strategic initiatives with confidence. So welcome, Henry. And then moving on, joining Henry is Will Ricciardi, a distinguished strategic customer success manager at Bitsight, with more than 7 years of experience in cybersecurity, third-party risk management, and cyber insurance. Will is a certified third-party risk professional through shared assessments. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, and works closely with enterprise and cyber insurers to embed Bitsight's cyber risk intelligence solution into their vendor risk management and governance programs. His work helps organizations reduce their attack surface and strengthen overall cyber resilience, which is also very important for today. And lastly, we have Cameron Smith. You'll see Cam in a minute, well, a little bit longer in a minute, but you'll see Cam. Cam is Strategic Customer Success Manager at Bitsight with more than 2 years of experience supporting and building TPRM programs of our clients. Can focus on optimizing continuous monitoring programs, vendor assessment setup, and first-party external attack surface management, all essential to more modern, scalable risk management. He is also a shared assessment TPRM certified professional and is passionate about helping organizations proactively assess and mitigate risk before incidents occur, which is very important to us, and securing both the external attack surface, and the vendor ecosystems. So welcome y'all. If we could go one more, and I'll stop talking soon and let the speakers take the stage. So really quickly, what to expect today. We're gonna have two really interesting client spotlight stories. One is a retail company and how they scale their VRM program. And then the next story is going to be about a financial institutes, their struggles, what their stakeholders really want to know and improve, and how do our teams help them prioritize the insights over noises. We're going to give you a little bit more information on professional services. What does that mean? How does it help you? How does this combine with all the data, workflows, and solutions provided by Bitsight? Shows you like a 1 + 1 is bigger than 2. So all the good stuff. And of course, as we said a little bit earlier, we're going to address your questions in the very end. So make sure you submit them. And then I think without further ado, we'll start with a poll to just get a sense of what you would like to know, what you focus on today. And I'll pass the stage to Will and Henry. Please take away.
All right, excellent. I'll take a look and see what the polls here come out with some different options. All right, so it looks like a lot of individuals here today are curious about streamlining vendor onboarding and assessments. That's great. We're going to talk about a lot about that piece here to start off. Quite a few people looking into introducing continuous monitoring as well, which is great. That could mean that maybe you're already doing some of that today or looking to really get into it from the ground up. Of course, regulatory and compliance is there on the third piece, but very heavy, it looks like, on streamlining the vendor onboarding and assessment. So this is excellent. We'll dig deeper into kind of the first client scenario, specifically around vendor assessments, and talk about how we've helped that specific customer with that process. But before we do go into that, wanted to introduce a few things that a lot of our customers, a lot of organizations, just generally speaking, are thinking about this year as they're going into 2026. The three key challenges that we've heard about and continue to discuss with our customers are these three right here. So regulations, continuous visibility, and reporting and executive confidence. So what does that all mean? What are these organizations asking themselves? Well, regulations globally, there's different regulations for each of the attendees. I know we have a large group of people here live, and I'm sure plenty of people are going to be watching this as a recording. So plenty of change happening and will continue to change. How do they keep up with this change to make sure that their processes are efficient? I'll talk about how we utilize our tooling as well as our services to really help organizations tackle that. Continuous visibility. So utilizing Bitsight data, utilizing the different data points that you have available to make sure that you're not just doing a one-time assessment of these vendors, but understanding what's the risk associated throughout the relationship and what's the most impactful way to do that. So Will's going to be tackling that one specifically with some examples of a customer on where we utilized different data points to make sure that there's robust visibility with a nice, efficient process. And then last but not least here, the big thing, TPRM programs as a whole are continuing to really get a lot of momentum. So which is great to hear. There's still the big piece of how do we make sure that we're reporting on our successes the correct way. You still may need to get some internal stakeholder buy-in from different departments all the way up to your C-suite. How do you make sure that you're communicating it to all those different stakeholders the most effective way? So we'll talk about all these three things as we go through our webinar here today. All right, so how does our team at the professional services really help So with these three challenges, well, we help understand what those regulations are. We make sure that they are aligned to your risk appetite, as well as then are put into your process to make sure that you are aligning to them and can show the auditors that, yes, you are compliant with them. What about continuous visibility? Well, I already talked about us utilizing different data points and making sure that you can see a robust view of your vendor population. There's different methodologies and strategies that go along with it. Again, very specific to your risk appetite, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And the last piece is the reporting. Our teams, we all come in with, of course, what we have available in our portal, which is great. But the great thing about coming through with the professional services is that there is this custom reporting that we can do with those data sets and not just relying what's in the tooling itself. Again, we're here to be your partner and make sure that you are communicating the great work that your TPRM programs are doing to all of your stakeholders. All right, so first customer scenario here. I wanted to talk about focusing on the vendor risk assessment process. So we'll talk about the retail company that has really increased their efficiency with the use of some of our updated tooling that is available to our customers. So quick snapshot on this customer. It is a retail customer that has roughly 55,000 employees. They are monitoring well over 2,000 vendors. So this includes the risk assessment processes as well as continuous monitoring. So a lot of work needs to be done to understand what is the risk associated with that population and how do you act on it. Well, a couple of challenges that they had was very focused on the risk assessment process. On average, they were completing the process within 30 days. Sometimes a little bit longer, sometimes shorter, but on average, it was right at 30 days. Now, sounds good, but we can make it better, and we did. They also were repeatedly looking at all of the evidence in a manual way. So think of this as your day-to-day, you get 10 different documents from a vendor to assess. You're going back and forth into all of those documents multiple times because you are having to look at it for every single control that you're assessing. It takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to do that manually. That also then resulted in hundreds of findings per assessment. Some of these findings were not 100% accurate. They may have been even duplicative. Again, it just happens to be with that manual effort that happens. We're all human, and we're looking to kind of make sure that we can get some help from that. Last but not least is the performance. They had a great program in place and have an amazing program in place today. How do they communicate to the right stakeholders? How do they go to the table and say, this is important? We need to make sure that we are investing in this, and every single stakeholder is taking these risks and acting on it. So we help them with that, utilizing, again, what we have at the portal as our data, but also some custom reporting that our team helped from the professional services. Now, after the results, briefly to highlight a few things is, we brought down the average time to 10 days, so 3 times faster. How did we do that? We utilized the capabilities in our VRM platform, which utilizes, of course, AI is a big thing, so that's one thing. We've gotten a second pair of eyes to help us go through these. It's not going to only look at our human assessors, but also get that AI assessor in there to make sure that it is efficient and effective. That helped with making sure that there isn't hundreds of findings every single assessment, making sure there isn't duplicative findings in there. And then last but not least is that, as I mentioned, the custom reporting to really showcase the impact that we are having on the organization as well as the vendor population. How are we bringing down that risk overall? All right, so let's talk a little bit more about what do we do as professional services. There are plenty of professional service options out there. We do bring a lot to the table that others do not. One of which is starting with the strategy. You can look to us to come to the table and understand your program, understand your risk appetite, and make sure that we come to an agreement on how do we now tackle your goals. Here's a couple of examples on the page of roadmap. So customers have different priorities. And do we want to start with tackling our legacy kind of backlog vendors right away? Do we gradually get through all of them over time? What's the best way to do it? Who do we target first? And what is our kind of requirements for all of these different tiers? We come to the table with our best practices. We understand your program. We customize it to your needs, and then we make sure that the product, so Bitsight's portal, is aligned to that as well. So all of that is starting with the strategy as we onboard you as our client, as our professional services client. All right. So I'm going to hand it over to Cam next, just to show you what does it look like in the, just a brief glance at all of the different functionalities. So Cam, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Henry. Appreciate it. Yeah, as Henry notes, I'm here today just to give you a quick 5-minute interlude to show you the fun stuff, right? So how some of what Henry was describing in the platform actually works and reflects. So as Henry noted, there's 2 key parts to kind of operationalizing and speeding up those assessments, right? He noted the immediate access to vendor responses, as well as those summaries within seconds. You'll hopefully be able to see in this 5 minutes how that really works within the Bitsight portal and how Henry's team is able to speed those assessments up for you. If you already had access to Bitsight VRM or CM, you can also test out these capabilities for yourself. So starting off here, I'm starting off on the vendor risk management module. And then if I just show this quick video to you guys, you can see I've in theory connected to this test vendor called Black Hills Technology. And I've been immediately able to click into their security profile, right? So what that means is the documentation in that security profile is anything they've uploaded previously based on a previous connection to another Bitsight customer. Maybe they're just updating their Bitsight profile one-off as well. But this quick connection capability allows you to see documentation right away. You don't have to wait for them to answer your requirements. If they have stuff already uploaded, you can see it right away. So when we think about that, maybe you've sent out requirements within Bitsight VRM, maybe 3 out of those 4 requirements they already have in the platform. 3 out of those 4 requirements you don't have to wait for a response back on. So that's really that immediate access piece, which helps the process. And then the second part to this that Henry mentioned is summaries within seconds. So within VRM, this is specifically applicable to the SOC 2. And we have a very powerful AI reader called Instant Insights, which specifically analyzes those SOC 2s and breaks it down in a summary sort of way, right? So you can see here, I was able to quickly run within really a second this model on that SOC 2. It's broken it down into specific key sections so I can really focus on what is important. So you can see it's highlighted those key risk sections. It's actually given me the sources for the points that it's pulled out and allows me to download it in a nice PDF at the top right there. So for Henry's team, summaries within seconds gives you these instant insights on SOC 2s, and then also that is immediate access to documentation right when you connect to a vendor. So that, really think of that on the vendor risk management side of things. I can't leave this without also showing you Bitsight Framework Intelligence. Right now, this other powerful AI tool is just in our continuous monitoring module, but we are going to bring it to both vendor risk management as well as the first party side, which is SPM. And so you can see here the process for that and creating a new assessment. So the goal of this particular tool is really just to speed up assessment process and give a GRC analyst or whoever's working on that team some time back, right? So we know how long some SOC 2s can be. The goal is to parse through some of that information for you. So previously that tool I showed was just a SOC 2 reader. This framework intelligence tool You can upload a SOC 2, insurance documentation, a questionnaire, as many documentation as you want. And then, as you can see here on the screen, you can select a particular framework, a standard framework that you want to then compare that documentation against. So we're going to load in all the questions and controls from that document, from that standard, and then we're going to compare and parse all of that vendor information to it. Coming soon as well, if you're interested, it's in the beta right now. We're also going to get custom framework. So if you have a questionnaire that you send out to vendors, you're able to upload the specific questionnaire. It will compare their documentation to this. Also, if you don't see a specific standard in here that you may want, you can always reach out to us. We'll work to kind of get that uploaded within the portal. So for the sake of this example, I'm just going to upload a SOC 2, but you can see it's easy as that. Pick a framework, upload the documentation, the Bitsight AI will analyze. I am going to fast forward. I promise that process only takes like 2 to 3 minutes usually, but you can see what it's created is a nice clean output of 3 categories: compliant, not compliant, needs review. This is pretty good numbers, right? So 74% of those controls, which comes out to 79, we viewed as compliant with that framework. You can see 10 controls, 17 controls we've seen as not compliant or needs review. I'm then able to sort in on, let's say, those needs review questions. I can click in. I can see exactly that question from the NIST. I can see the status we've set it as, and then our model's output and answer. So what has occurred, right, is we found some good information. So the organization supports tagging assets, endpoint management. However, we didn't see an explicit mention of a lifecycle management cycle. So that's why it probably fell into the needs review category. You might want to go back into the documentation and review that specific category. So you can see the references to the sources for the stuff that were compliant. You can go back in, review how the model has parsed those and pulled them out. And then finally, we also do pull in Bitsight external data, right? So for insecure systems, we found that this Bitsight risk vector mapped to this question. This particular vendor had an F in that. So that may also complement your comparison of that internal information they've given you to that external data that we're seeing as well. So Bitsight's done some powerful stuff here with AI and some powerful tools to help speed up the assessment process. This is just a quick view. If you have a Bitsight account manager, I'd definitely reach out to them to see more. If you're not with Bitsight yet, I'd go through our website and we can certainly review some questions and stuff there. But hopefully this gave you an idea of what Henry was speaking to. And I will send it back over to Henry on that.
All right, excellent. Thanks, Cam. So I do see a lot of good questions in the chat, so we will take those here in just a little bit during our Q&A. Just to continue to talk about how professional services help with the vendor assessment piece. So Cam just showed the portal as far as how we will gather information from the vendors, utilize certain functionalities to speed up the process. Note the assessors on our team will, of course, do a review on all of this information on top of it to make sure that it is 100% accurate and to your aligns with your risk appetites. So what is the actual deliverables that we provide at the end of the day as we go through that whole process of sending out requirements, gathering information, and analyzing it? Here, I'll show you a few examples. So first and foremost is the risk assessment report. This is a report that will showcase what is our analysis findings and what we recommend as next steps. So I'll briefly go through this, showcasing what kind of key elements you'll see in there. It's an overview of the assessment process on the first page, as well as the Bitsight rating for those vendors at the time of the risk assessment. The second page has an overview illustration of what were some of the key findings, what was good, what was bad. If you can go to the next slide. The other 2 pages here are going to be a lot more in depth. So here you're going to see a issues overview for every single issue that is identified. Our assessors will be writing up a statement as to what did the vendor say and why is it that we are pulling up the red flag saying that this is an issue. Then there's also a page for recommendations. So for every single issue that is identified, what is our recommendation for the vendor to go and do to remediate these? And then next slide, please. We also incorporate CTI information. So we will add this into every single risk assessment report to showcase what do we see from our threat intelligence exposure reporting. And then from there, you can take additional steps outside of just the risk assessment process to do a more robust remediation plan, as well as a strategic plan with those vendors to make sure that their risk is lower. Outside of this, I wanted to point out the executive reporting, because again, this is very important to a lot of our customers to showcase the impact of the programs. Just to name a few things that we provide: weekly status updates, pretty common across the board, of course, but we want to make sure that you and your team have transparent information as you go through the process. So weekly will be provided to your team that is actually part of the TPRM program. Outside of that, we do higher level reporting as well. We provide executive level reporting on vendor population. What were some of the risk trends that we found as part of this risk assessment process? What do we expect as kind of upcoming exposures that we need to be aware of? We also then want to highlight the success stories for each of our vendors that have done great work. It always speaks to especially the non-technical stakeholders on the great work that has been identified and how it now impacts their day-to-day business. I know I went through this scenario fairly quickly, so I'm happy to answer questions during the Q&A process, but for now, I'll hand it over to Will to talk us through continuous monitoring.
Thanks, Henry. Yeah, so today's kind of story we'll be kind of going through, which was with a large financial institution, and how we kind of prioritized key threats in reducing some of the noise they might be receiving from the current alert settings, as well as prescribing some more actionable alert settings to help reduce some of that noise that they were seeing. Great. So quick snapshot. Again, it was a large financial institution, about 217,000 employees. Within Bitsight, they had around a little over 6,000 vendors of theirs, although they have tens of thousands of vendors. These are mainly the more critical ones, I would say. But a few challenges they were experiencing. One was really low engagement from the third parties. And part of that low engagement was really they were providing the vendor with kind of like some unclear expectations of what they actually wanted them to do. And so the way they had alerts configured initially, it was creating a lot of noise. But from a regulatory standpoint, they did have to follow up on these alerts and account for them and at least show that they actually reached out to the vendor. And then there was also kind of no clear ownership around, hey, what do you want me to exactly do? Or what do you want me to fix? Or are you just telling me I'm performing poorly in this area? And so that kind of snowballed into, ineffective outreaches with the supplier or the vendor there. And so there was real kind of concern from the leadership standpoint. Hey, are we being effective in our approach, right? Should we, layer on a different approach to this, or should we tweak some of the alerts and how they're triggering today? So one of the things that we did look at was, okay, let's take a look at the alerts. Let's see if we can kind of dial these back to, one, make them meaningful, and two, there was a bandwidth issue on the team, right? There was just too many alerts to handle at a time. How can we dial that back? So one, make them more meaningful, and two, lower the volume that's coming in on a daily basis. So what we looked at was actually, and something I personally like to do, is take a look at some of the studies that have been done on Bitsight data. And one of my favorite studies was done by a cyber insurance broker called Marsh McLennan. And what they did is they looked at specific risk vectors within Bitsight looked at the historical data of those risk vectors, and then compared that to their claims data set. And what they found was that these 13 out of our 24 risk vectors were actually statistically correlated to the likelihood of someone experiencing an incident. And then they took it a step further, and they placed a likelihood on each of the individual risk vector grades. And so we took a look at that study and we said, okay, well, let's focus on just these 13 risk vectors. Let's not focus on all 24 because we know that they're statistically correlated to the likelihood of someone suffering an incident. But then we looked at the individual likelihoods of the grades, and we basically drew a line in the sand for each risk vector and said, okay, at what point does the likelihood significantly increase to where it is a cause for concern? And so we applied that methodology to their current alert settings, which helped reduce a lot of alerts they're receiving. But it also made the alerts more meaningful. They could also, communicate not only internally to the relationship owners who own the relationship with the vendor of why they are concerned, right? And then two, added more general terminology because we do map these risk vectors over to security program areas. So instead of saying, hey, we're concerned about your grade and patching cadence because it because it puts you at an X amount of times more likely of suffering a security incident, say, hey, there's an increased probability of you suffering an incident based on your vulnerability management practices. So we're generalizing those terms, looking for making it easier for one, internal stakeholders to understand, and then two, the vendor as well, if they're not familiar with Bitsight. And then in addition to that, if you can go back one more slide. And so part of that, and a combination which we'll get into, is another kind of proactive thing that we did, which I like to call strategic risk hunting. Part of this engagement, we reached out to 60 critical third parties. Upon reaching out, we actually got 45% of those showed us actual remediation plans of the alerts and findings that we were reaching out about. And actually, half of all the vendors that we actually outreached improved their security posture. But what this allowed the organization to do is save over 144 hours within a 3-month time frame. That one allowed, their own colleagues to work on, other things that are probably more important. Not to say this isn't important, but allow them to further work on other projects that are also going to help reduce risk throughout the organization. Cool. So one of the things that management or the leadership team was particularly concerned about was their law firms. So the vendors that fall within that legal industry. And they were particularly concerned around those law firms being targeted for ransomware attacks. And they wanted us to take a look at these law firms and see, hey, which ones are more susceptible to experiencing, an incident or a ransomware attack. And so, what myself and the professional services consultants did is we took a look at all of their law firm vendors. And if you want to go to next slide, one of the things that we did was we know that actually CISA, has a kind of a notice to say, hey, these are the protocols or ports that if they are exposed, they're most targeted for ransomware attacks. And these protocols here we capture within Bitsight. So we said, okay, well, let's take a look at all these law firm vendors and see right now which ones have any one of these ports exposed. And then what we're going to do is we're going to reach out specifically to the vendor, not about the Bitsight rating, not about the risk vector grade within open ports, but about the actual finding that poses immediate risk because it's currently exposed. And so it's a much more targeted, much more granular approach. And one, you're giving the vendor clear direction of what to look at, rather than saying, hey, look at your Bitsight rating, you're not performing well, and they might get it and say, well, where do you want me to start, right? And so this is obviously a much more targeted, prescriptive approach where they have a clear, defined, action item. Yep. And so within Bitsight, we kind of put this report together. We said, hey, we looked across all these protocols. These are, how many law firms that we found, having, each of these protocols exposed. And just give them a sense of kind of the overall exposure across this, industry of vendors. And then we started our outreach.
All right, excellent. Thanks, Will, for that overview. So moving forward here, I wanted to now talk about what our customers can expect when they sign up for professional services. Right here, we have outlined kind of very high level expectations on what to see for the first 90 days. And I've bucketed them into 3 pieces, 30, 60, 90. The first piece here, as I mentioned, is important, is the strategy piece, understanding your risk appetite, coming to the table with best practices, and then configuring the assessment process or continuous monitoring process so that our team can execute on it properly, as well as then the tooling so that it is as efficient and effective as possible. I'll talk a little bit about the FAQ piece here, but we do pride ourselves as far as what our team members come back with or come with to the table. So we have a lot of individuals with Big Four experience, as well as leading and operationalizing these types of programs for large organizations. If you can go back to the last slide, just to talk about what else we can show for the 60 and 90 piece briefly. All right, excellent, thank you. So after that first piece of configuring the tool and configuring your processes, we then start actually actioning those. And then roughly around the 60-day mark, we're going to see some initial reports come in, either again from the vendor assessment piece or the continuous monitoring. And we're going to be showcasing that to your teams as well as any other stakeholders to showcase where are we going, how effective have we been right from the get-go. We're going to continue to do that. And then we typically roughly around this 90-day, maybe 120-day piece, we come back to the table and just do a lessons learned session. Understanding, is there anything that we need to tweak right away as we think about the larger population, or are we in a good shape? Those lessons learned are impactful throughout the relationship that we have with our customers, and we do them quite frequently, whether that is on a quarterly basis, all the way even up to a weekly or bi-weekly basis. All right, so moving on to the FAQ piece, what does having services, or how does having services differ from getting Bitsight products? Well, I already highlighted that you are getting experts in this field to help with the strategy, to really take on the day-to-day piece activities of assessing vendors, to monitoring vendors, outreach to vendors. We are here as your strategic partners, as well as your subject matter experts to tackle this on a day-to-day basis. Who else outside of our professional services team is supporting your program? So Bitsight is a one-stop shop. You get the data that is the best in the industry. You get the tooling that is also the best in the industry, but we get the people. And so you get myself, you get Will. So you get professional services, CSMs, you have your account managers. We are in support team. We are all here to make sure that your program is successful. So it is not just a one person, it is a whole team that you are signing up for here at Bitsight. All right, if we move forward, just to wrap up a few things that we've talked about here. So what are some questions that you should be thinking about as you are now planning for next year? First, how quickly are you going to be adapting to the different regulations or requirements that are coming to your industry or your organization? How are you going to streamline assessments? That was a key piece when we looked at the poll today. A lot of individuals here on the live room today are thinking about that. Do you have the right people to do this? Do you have the right bandwidth to do this? A lot of organizations are doing a million things. They're looking for strategic partners to take some of the day-to-day activities off of their plate so they can focus on strategy. Do you have the right data and tools in place to really go ahead and focus on it? And then, as you can see, a few other things here, but the last one I just want to mention is the reporting. Are you getting the right metrics to then report to your stakeholders on how you are going about mitigating risk and how impactful it is to your day-to-day piece and what's the ROI? All right. So I think next we are going to, oh, yes, I forgot about this slide. So for one of our quotes from our many customers, they do value us clearly by stating, "Look, we are here to really give you the foundation to become a mature program or get you to that next level that you are looking to get to." So I'll hand it over to Chung Lu for the next steps.
Awesome. That was great, Henry, Will, and Cam. Love the demo. I was like 5 seconds late because I was in the back end just looking through all the questions. It's great. Just before we addressed it, just so you know, like we introduced in the very beginning, we got a lot of questions, like always, but if we couldn't get through all of them, don't worry, we'll definitely make sure that we follow up and get your questions answered. For now, let's start with, let me see, this one from Ines. This might be more for Henry, but Will, feel free to jump in. So this is a sort of a deep dive on the risk assessment report into practice. I think there's a couple of scenarios, and Harry, how do we approach those? So how does it look like in this following cases? So one is vendors are not in the Bitsight's own inventory. If we don't have the intelligence or our rating around that for other companies. And then two, vendor is inherently low risk. For example, vendor is a consultant that won't actually be sending sensitive data. Are reports still made for those scenarios? If so, how would those look like? Are they bypassed from getting a report since they didn't need a full assessment? Or would Bitsight AI still make, I think I'm taking this as framework intelligence like we shared, or instant insights. Would those capabilities still make reports on them will be formed differently? Would love examples.
All right, excellent questions. So just to recap the questions is, one of which is, of course, the tiering process. So if it is a low inherent risk vendor, how do you go about actually assessing them? What's the right level of due diligence to do there? It really depends on your risk appetite. If it is a low inherent risk vendor, it's a decision that you have to make on whether or not you're going to conduct any type of due diligence on it. Is a Bitsight company report that showcases the external exposure of them good enough? A lot of organizations say yes. Other organizations say maybe they still want to have at least a SOC 2 or some type of audit report that showcases that they have their controls in place. Now, there's a tiered approach for all of this. Happy to dig deeper into what that strategy is, but in a nutshell, it's typically your most critical vendors are going to be assessed the most stringently. So looking at all the documentations, all the evidence, all of different controls that are impactful for the service or product that they are providing your organization. And then on the opposite side is, if they do not have access to sensitive data, you either give them the quote unquote fast pass and you pull a external report on them just to showcase the auditors that you have done your due diligence at that level. And Chung, now that I started answering that one, what was the first part of the question?
That's going back. So
it was just the reporting piece on what they can expect for even the lower ones. Absolutely. So we do have different levels of reporting on our side that we provide our customers, anywhere from those different tiering that I just mentioned, all the way from your low inherent risk, which may get the Bitsight, let's say, company report, or a very high level due diligence process, to the most in-depth analysis, which we are calling our high touch assessments. And happy to provide examples of what those reportings look to this group here.
Great. Next one, let's take this one from Jennifer. What's the best approach to communicate clearly in the portal? I think maybe this is more like in the sense of when us as the professional service team help the organization, how do we provide concise, actionable guidance to the vendor? Like, how do we communicate and potentially drive some actions to remediate the risk? Maybe this is for both of you.
Yeah. Will, do you want me to jump in first, or you want to go?
Yeah, you jump in first, and I'll piggyback off of it.
All right, excellent. Well, if the question is referencing, let's say, Bitsight data from a continuous monitoring aspect, who best to talk about Bitsight ratings other than Bitsight professionals? So we will know all the nitty-gritties. We will know exactly how to guide the vendors on where to look, what to approach from a strategic perspective. Maybe there's some low-hanging fruit that they need to get out of the way, and then really monitor their process of remediation from start to finish. The tooling has great capabilities to monitor all of this, whether it's on the risk assessment process or the continuous monitoring side. All of it is at their fingertips. All of the communication can be done within the tool for audit purposes. And when you do sign up for professional services, we do provide that white glove treatment of jumping onto calls with your vendors to really dig deeper into all of that as well.
Yeah. And maybe, Jennifer, I'll give you kind of a quick scenario. Let's say there's a question within the framework or control around like data encryption. Now you saw in kind of Cam's overview that we'll sometimes be able to map Bitsight risk vectors to a controller question where, one, we can provide direct evidence, or two, insight, right? And let's say that question, again, is, hey, do you encrypt data? We would map over SSL certificates and configurations, using, having no expired certs, and obviously using the latest version of TLS would be indicative of that. However, in the information within the artifacts that they provided, or you uploaded into Framework Intelligence, stated, yes, we do have this, we have XYZ policy in place and processes, but then you take a look at the grades of those risk vectors, and they show a D and an F. So at that point, that gives you the ability to kind of dig a little bit deeper and say, hey, you have this policy, right? Can you tell me a little bit more about it? We're seeing a lot of, misconfigurations, around data encryption, particularly in these areas, and you can highlight specific findings that show that, right? And so you can quickly kind of come to the conclusion of, hey, while they have a process in place, either one needs updating or it's not being adhered to.
Love the examples. We got a lot of questions about framework intelligence and AI, and I partially attribute this to Cam's awesome demo. But before we do that, and we'll tackle this by theme, so make sure that within this limited time, we'll get most questions around this answer. But just before that, we have a question from David, and I know this is sort of a Bitsight Intelligence one-on-one, but I always appreciate folks like joining us maybe for the first time. To sort of understand what we can offer. So this question is based on sort of the Bitsight rating and intelligence that visual. So is the green, amber, red scale configurable based on my company's own risk tolerance, or is it set by Bitsight?
It is. It's set by Bitsight. I'm assuming you're referring to kind of the basic, intermediate, and advanced, what we consider basic, intermediate, advanced ratings. Where you can kind of toggle that own threshold is actually within the portfolio tiering matrix, where you can set individual thresholds that align more with your own risk appetite. And so you don't necessarily have to follow our cohorts there.
Yeah. And just to add on top of that, we've talked about reporting. If you do have other thresholds that you want to show different colors to different stakeholders, that's where the custom reporting comes into play for our team. We're happy to make those changes and then make sure that we are presenting them in the right color scheme for you outside of the tool.
Yeah, I think, Harry, this probably goes back to like the value that professional service team and, the bigger sort of what folks can get from this is really helping you to not only understand the risk, but also help you to communicate to different set of audience, making sure that you are showcasing that the job that's done and the value that's out of it. So I love this question. All right, I know a lot of you are asking. Natalie, Michael, I think George, you have a lot of questions. So let me summarize this around framework intelligence. One is who can access it. So continuous monitoring customer and vendor risk management customers, you will have, based on what's available in it, you will have access to it at no additional cost. That's something we want to make sure you know. The other thing is, can you vendor or can you opt out? You definitely can. I think Cam shared a link in the chat. It's around, sort of the best practice and some of the resource on how we can help you navigate through this adoption AI journey. Because we know you want to understand the risk, you want to do what's best for your organization. You also need to talk to all your internal stakeholders to help them understand what you're doing with this very, very exciting capabilities. But I think what questions, maybe the question that Henry you can share, because I'm sure your customers are also asking you all the time is, and you tackled this a little bit in your presentation as well, but what would you say when, customer come to you and say, how do you think about framework intelligence and Bitsight's AI capabilities and what's the best way to leverage them? And how do I make sure that the human intervention is there so we are not having the hallucination? We know this keep training in the best way it can so we can make the most out of it.
Yeah, happy to jump in with a couple things here. Generally speaking of just AI and where we are with that state is, it's a lot of broad strokes right now is looking at all these controls, making the initial review very efficient, which is great. Where the human aspect comes in is making sure that it is customized to your needs in the sense of we're looking at all of these findings and all these controls on how it is impactful to you. Each organization has different risk appetites. They also use the products and services from other third parties very differently. So that's where that kind of accuracy at that level comes into play with the human overview.
Well, is there anything you want to add?
I mean, Henry summed it up pretty well there. Yeah, I think, the biggest obviously value add here, I think, is the time saving aspect, right? I think, in some sort of capacity, you're taking the information in the artifacts that the vendors are providing you and mapping them to some sort of framework, right? Whether that's a standard one or your own custom, questionnaire. And, having AI do that, for you, obviously with human validation and review of what the AI output is, can really help speed things up. So.
Awesome. I think we have time for one more or questions from one person. And I really appreciate the enthusiasm from chat. So we're going to take on your questions. And again, if we didn't cover all your questions, we'll make sure to follow up. But chat has a couple of questions also regarding like approaches of Bitsight. Let's just start with the first one. Can Bitsight identify an alert on sudden rating drops or the indicators of compromise across critical suppliers? And well, I believe you have read through the rest of chat's question. So if you want to incorporate some of the answer to others, feel free to do so.
Yeah. So Chad, absolutely. You could set up proactive alerts to be notified if the rating drops or if any risk vector grade drops, and you can actually pick and choose which risk vectors are important to you. And there's a few different ways you can kind of skin the cat here with like the ratings drop, right? You can do it by percentage of the rating or by actual point drops as well, or set thresholds to draw a line in the sand and say, hey, if any of my vendors drop below rating of a 690, I want to be notified. And then as far as like the methodology goes, to the second part, which was compromise, indicators of compromise. One of the things I would look at is our compromised systems section of risk vectors, which would be bot infections, malware, unsolicited communications. Those would all be indicators that maybe something's already taken place, right? And in the simplest terms, and theoretically, if someone has a piece of malware emanating from their network, they are technically already compromised in some way as well. So what methodologies does Bitsight use to identify fourth-party connections and assess their potential cascading risk? Great question. So we use a few different ways to attribute the use of either services from a particular company or fourth party, if you will, as well as the products that they use. One comes from a qualitative source, which we consider as suspected use. And the other one comes from a more quantitative or technology-based relationship, which is confirmed use. We know that they use these products and services from this company. The qualitative source uses natural language processing to look through JD reports, UCC filings, as well as job web postings, looking for mentions of the use of a particular product from a company. There is a caveat there. There has to be there is a critical threshold in terms of number of mentions before we make an attribution. But again, that context is provided under the evidence certainty, which would show up as suspected use within the platform. So you do have context around that attribution. The more the high confidence one, right? The confirmed attribution would be again technology-based relationships from our own scanning. For example, we scan for certificates, right? So as part of that scanning infrastructure or scanning the data that we collect, we can see who issued the cert. So we know that X company uses DigiCert to manage their certificates. The second piece, which is really cool to me, is these attributions are actually a byproduct of our own vulnerability scanning. So with vulnerabilities, we obviously develop product fingerprints to identify the products and the versions of those products that are in use. And so that's really good intel on what products they're using. And so then we can then feed that information into our fourth party products data to show you, hey, these are the products they're using. Oh, by the way, here are the assets the products are associated with.
Awesome. Well, I would love to be one of your customers because I feel like any questions I have, it will answer you really well. So it's really helpful. This is a virtual call, but I always want to say that thank you, Henry, Will, and Cam. If anyone could give them a round of applause in your mind, that would be appreciated because it's really helpful. Again, we will share the recording and the presentation with you. So no worries that you will not get lost with this valuable content. Just before we wrap up, one last thing we would share with you is if you enjoy this webinar and enjoy the content we provide to you, we hope to see you in next month as well. We're talking about something that's really top of GRC and SOC teams' mind is how does the two teams really can collaborate seamlessly. We'll have two folks, a GRC leader as well as a threat intelligence researcher who was in the SOC team analysis. We're gonna have this like real world scenario that have this conversation, be like, okay, within the 72 hours of a cyber incident, what should we do? How do we collaborate? So we hope you will join us next time. Thank you for your time with us today. And thank you again, Henry, Will, and Cam. We'll see you next time.